It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now, here he is, the man who knows the reason why Nexus attacked The Undertaker back in 2010, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer. Welcome to another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. I am Bill Chase, chronicling my 33 amazing and fun years of being a fan of the wonder that is professional wrestling. Today, we delve into July 6th, 1998, the day where Bill Goldberg became the man. In front of 41,000 people at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, a record house for WCW, and a shift in the Monday Night Wars after being dominated the week before by WWF. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out, of course, to Pro Wrestling Ontario, the best pro wrestling action, most competitive from bell to bell, beginning to end, match by match. Check us out on YouTube. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, there is a link above in the video. Check it out. Click on the link, subscribe, watch some full shows, watch some matches, watch some promos, watch the backstage shenanigans that take place on Foundation. Follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and like us on Facebook. All right, here we go with another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, continuing the theme of WCW. That's right, last week we talked about the formation of the NWO. We fast forward 2 years, almost 2 years to the day. The night where Bill Goldberg became the man. I actually think it was 2 years to the day. Yeah, wow. So, pretty much the 2-year anniversary of the formation of the NWO. Or actually, no, scratch that. It was the day before the 2-year anniversary. My bad. But that was it was almost the 2-year anniversary of the NWO. So it's almost fitting that this moment was about to take place. Now, I should give a little backstory here. So in July of 1998, my wrestling fandom is just at an all-time high. Again, we don't have the Monday Night Wars to choose from. It's not the same as it was here in Canada. It's not the same as in Canada as it was in the States. We didn't have to choose. Again, Raw aired at midnight, just an hour after the original showing would end in the States. And midnight on TSN, 4 p.m. Tuesday afternoons the next day. Wednesday afternoons at 4, it was Nitro. So, again, it was an unbelievable way to... What's the word? Sorry. An unbelievable way to just enjoy wrestling fandom at its utmost. And I will be honest with you, I had lost faith a bit in WCW at this point. Not a lot. I was still watching Nitro pretty much every week. I missed the odd episode here and there. But to me, back in the Spring Stampede pay-per-view that took place in April, the night after, when Macho Man beat Sting for the title at Spring Stampede, it led pretty much to the formation of, it was one of the things that led to the formation of the Wolfpack, the NWO separating, stuff like that. Like, there was some good stuff happening. I thought the dissension with Hogan and Savage was good television. And again, the two factions are actually breaking off. But I never really got into the Wolfpack, to be honest, even though I liked a lot of the guys in it. But yeah, I don't know. So something about it just didn't seem all that appealing to me. I really, really don't know. But then they turned Bret Hart heel. And I'm thinking about, so Bret's run has been a disaster at this point. And I even said that, I'm like, something's up with Bret. I'm noticing this at the age of 15. And again, for people who listen to these first few episodes of this podcast, pretty much know how huge a Bret Hart fan I am. I was hoping he was the third man for the NWO last week, if you'd listened to that episode. Now, the BC NWO had almost just become its own worst enemy in a lot of ways. People were starting to get sick of it. Even though the audience was still large. It wasn't to the point where they were losing their audience either. But at the same time, though, people were still watching, like, maybe can we shift in a different direction? I think the Wolfpack, even if I didn't like it, that did help, actually. I think it helped kind of keep the interest in the NWO for a lot of fans. But for me personally, it just was not a captivating story that way. Like, it was at first, and then it just kind of, as it went on, I'm like, there's really nothing special about this. And again, that was just my thoughts as a fan at the time. But there was a guy. And that was Bill Goldberg. Here was a badass babyface. Jacked upwards of like 280, 290 pounds. Just demolishing heels left and right. Yeah, a lot of them were enhancement guys, but still. He was beating guys like Raven. He was beating guys like Conan, who were pretty high up on the card. So it's not as though he was just squashing just watching enhancement guys, he was, again, going over the mid-card. People forget that at this point. He was going over the mid-card in a big way. But he was, again, fans loved him. I loved him. I thought this guy is freaking awesome. And he started out as a heel, but eventually just caught on. Like, fans just enjoyed watching this guy destroy people. And it barely took a few months for him to start getting cheered, to the point where they're booking him last minute at pay-per-views. Again, I remember they booked him, I think it was a Super Brawl against Brad Armstrong. Brad Armstrong is an enhancement guy. But yet the crowd went nuts. So there you go. It just goes to show what the audience, if the audience wants something bad enough, even WCW will give it to you. Just kidding. No, but, well, kind of. But no, like, and the Spring Stampede pay-per-view, again, that was kind of a turning point for me. And the next night, when they turned Brett heel, I digress back to that. I'm not one of those guys that thinks, Brett's WCW run obviously criticized by 99.9% of people who watched it. I thought it started out well. Again, I was sad Brett left WWF. I was angry about the screw job. But when he started feuding with Flair, now, I know the whole Starrcade appearance thing was kind of a mishmash, but still, when he started feuding with Flair, I thought that was great stuff. I thought the little banter they had on Nitro was good. I thought the match itself was really good. I thought it was one of Brett's best matches in WCW, easily one of the top 5 for sure. And I felt it just made sense for the two to feud. Made perfect sense. And I'm thinking, okay, great, now Brett can focus on the NWO, can focus to getting to Hogan. Because to me, that's where it really was for the fans, like for myself. I wanted to see that match badly. Because we were robbed of it in WWF. I wanted to see it in WCW. That match was money. I don't care what anyone says. That match was buy rate personified. And I was actually guessing Starrcade 98. I'm thinking Brett and Hogan. And then Brett he kind of joined the NWO. That whole thing really confused me too. Helped Hogan win the title, beat Macho Man on the Nitro after Spring Stampede, and I was like, come on. And then, yeah, I don't know, it was just a mess. So I wasn't really enjoying Brett's run too much here, but there was a lot of stuff I was enjoying about WCW. Again, Goldberg, of course. I was enjoying the matches Chris Benoit and Raven were all having, DDP. Their little feud that they all had together. Benoit stuff with Booker, I thought was amazing, off the charts for the TV title. Booker's quest for the TV title, thought it was awesome. Great TV there. And I don't want to. I know when it sounds like I'm talking about the Wolfpack, I'm shitting on them. I'm really not. It was just there were good moments. I wasn't really my attention could be easily diverted. So the Wolfpack wasn't really holding my attention to the point where the original NWO incarnation was. And I love Sting. Sting's one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. I'll be honest with you, I still to this day think he looked ridiculous with the red face paint. I do. That might be an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people do like it, but I just thought he looked ridiculous. It looked like he just was an aging Florida man trying to badly get a tan to impress the young ladies. I don't know. But anyway, moving on. So, leading up to this episode of Nitro, there was a big hype around the possible Hogan-Goldberg match taking place at the Georgia Dome for the WCW Championship. Now, again, when the news first broke of this, now I don't watch Thunder. I hated Thunder. Hated it. And I would still watch Nitro often at this point, like I said, but I wouldn't watch Thunder at all, really. I'd watch clips of it here and there because they aired it on, because I got TBS, and then they would air it on CHTV, or sorry, it was called On TV. That was a rough time here in Hamilton. On the weekends. And I just never enjoyed Thunder whatsoever, and I think history's fans dictated it was a terrible show. But it had its moments, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it was the bad outweighed the good. So, and again, I'm also enjoying Raven feuding with Saturn at this point. I thought that was some good stuff, too. Again, I know that one gets a mixed review, but I don't know if I always liked the Raven-Saturn feud. So, Goldberg, at this point again, now they say they exaggerated the streak. Of course they did. Oh, you mean they lied about something in wrestling? Yeah. But some people are trying to say, oh, Goldberg's streak was more like not even 100 wins by the time it was broken. Yes, it was. It was it was exaggerated by maybe about 30 matches or so, 30 wins, but who cares? He was undefeated. He was dominant. He looked that way on television. So they exaggerated his house show count or whatever. Who cares? But anyway, he was still believable. He was still marketable, and he was still over. Again, this guy was getting the biggest reaction on every show. And Goldberg was a departure because, again, we all know that WCW built a lot of their top-tier talent off of stars from the WWF. Now, again, that's not a criticism. It was a smart move that Eric Bischoff utilized these guys, who many thought were past their prime, and put them in big money matches, big money angles. And again, with the whole NWO thing, it changed everything. It gave these guys longer careers on top than they might have had otherwise. So I understood his ambition, but I think a lot of fans, myself included, wanted to see a new star rise out of the ashes that wasn't familiar. And Goldberg was that guy. Now, there were, again, the mid-card in WCW was pretty strong, too, with the Cruiserweight division. Again, Jericho, okay, I forgot to credit Jericho here. Jericho was doing some hilarious stuff on television, feuding with Dean Malenko and whatnot. That was some really good stuff. But at this point, the feud had they were just dragging it out. I think, really, in hindsight, it should have ended at Slamboree. And even at this time, I remember saying to my buddy John Forjak, why is Jericho and Malenko still feuding? To me, I lost interest at this point in their feud, even though Jericho was still hilarious to watch. The way he would just, get, the conspiracy victim thing, that was good stuff. But by this point, I'm just like, can we move Jericho on to someone else? I know he was starting to feud with a couple others at this point, but still, and I know his stuff with Hoovy would continue into the summer as well. But anyway, I digress. So WCW, again, they had their fair share of captivating television, but WWF, now again, the week prior to this Nitro, now, I used to check the ratings. Now, again, I didn't read the dirt sheets. I didn't even have the internet yet at this point. I didn't read the dirt sheets yet. But we had this thing, a phone service it was a free phone service called Spectel. It was, of course, out of the Hamilton Spectator newspaper here in Hamilton. And there was hotlines. You can punch in codes to get, news of sports, regular news, Tycan news, and wrestling news. It was called the Wrestling Wrap. And they would give the ratings each week. So I paid attention to the Monday Night Wars ratings for a while. And on June I believe was it June the 30th? No, sorry, it was June 29th, because King of the Ring was the 28th. June 29th, they had it was the Fall of the King of the Ring. That was the night where Foley took his famous flight. And it was, of course, the rematch between Austin and Kane, where Kane had beat him for the title in the first blood match in controversial fashion, thanks to The Undertaker, and that began the whole Undertaker-Austin issue, which, again, that turned a lot of heads as well, because, wow, this is going to be huge. It's leading to SummerSlam. I knew right away, again, they're definitely going to fight at SummerSlam. I was looking forward to it. So WWE had a lot of momentum. They crushed Nitro because of that Austin-Kane match on free television, which set a record at that time. It would later be broken, pretty much by this match coming out. But it stayed a WWF record for a while. But either way, the Austin Kane match drew a huge rating. Raw overall beat Nitro by nearly 1.5 points. Yeah. It was like a 5.4 to, I believe, a 4 or 4.1. Now, here's the thing. The Monday Night Wars were, again, like I said, the funnest time to be a wrestling fan. But Vince McMahon, even though he wanted to win in the ratings, it wasn't the be-all, end-all for him, from what even the likes of legends like Ric Flair have said. That Bischoff was just primarily concerned about winning each Monday night. How can we win each Monday night rather than making his product better? Those are words from Ric Flair he said Off the Record on TSN. Whereas Vince just wanted to make his product better so he could win every Monday night and does not to have to worry about it week by week. And that's pretty much what ended up happening. Now, of course, Nitro's famous 83-week streak was broken back on April the 13th of this year of 1998. Now, since that point, they've traded victories. I know WWF dominated the month of May, and in June there were some close calls, but still, WCW, it seemed, was probably panicking. And I remember Bischoff on Off the Record saying that he's going to kick Vince's ass again in the ratings in 98. Well, it wasn't quite happening that way. So clearly with this big marquee match, even as a 15-year-old kid who didn't read the sheets, I'm thinking to myself, they're going to come up with something big. And lo and behold, Goldberg Hogan. I was psyched for this. I wanted to see Goldberg be the champion. Now, in my last episode, I stated how much I loved Hogan and the NWO. And as much as I still liked Hogan, being Hollywood Hogan, again, like I said, I just felt it was time for someone else. Someone else other than Hogan, someone else other than Savage or Sting to hold the title. And I liked all those guys. I loved all those guys. That was my childhood. But again, as a teenager, as a 15-year-old who's being bullied constantly, being picked on, I lived vicariously through badasses like Bill Goldberg. The guys who, when he was jackhammering even the likes of an Al Green or a Brad Armstrong or a Lodi, that was me jackhammering the douchebag who would try to push me into my locker in the hallway. Like, again, it sounds silly, yeah, even for a 15-year-old, but you know what? It might explain why I wasn't dating much but back then, but still, it was fun. It was it was fun to live vicariously through these guys, like I lived vicariously through Brett for many years. And I wanted to see this guy who I thought was the greatest thing WCW had at that point become the champion. Now, I know in hindsight you can see things differently when you're a lot older. Goldberg, they call him Greenberg, and there were reasons why. But it was the case where WCW just struck where the iron was hot, it seemed. To me, if a guy's catching on like that, you gotta get it done. But I remember saying to my good friend John Forjak, why are they not putting this on pay-per-view? Even back then, I knew pay-per-view money was big. It was a big deal for both companies, for WCW and WWF. So I'm like, well, but you know what? I shrugged it off. Rather than like being a jaded fan, I'm like, oh well, who cares? We got to see it. Now I still had the what they call the black box, the cheater box at that time, so I could have seen it for free regardless. But I didn't really what's the term? It didn't really bug me. It really annoyed me that it wasn't on pay-per-view like it did for a lot of people. Because I'm like thinking to myself, who cares? It's on television. So for the first time in a long time, I was truly actually psyched for a whole episode of Nitro from the Georgia Dome. So Raw, though, that week, I remember I was in summer school, so I'd done badly in grade 9. I kind of succumbed to anxiety and pressure of high school badly and did not do very well my first year. I only failed 2 classes, but I mainly averaged 50s and whatnot. I failed French and I failed math, subjects I was never good at any level. So I was in summer school taking French, and I just dreaded it every day. I had to ride my bike from my place on Lawfield Drive all the way to Sherwood High School. For those of you listening from Hamilton, you know what I'm talking about. It was just a tedious ride. I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through every day? But the summer was still fun because I had again, I mentioned the Hamilton Ticats a couple years ago during the formation of the NWO. The Ticats, I thought we had high hopes in 96. So we had Matt Dunnigan. He got injured 6 games in. We finished with a record of 8 wins and 10 losses at the end. But this time we had Danny McManus and Darren Flutie, 2-star offensive players. McManus a star QB, Flutie a star receiver, probably the best in the league. And the Ticats were on their way to something special. And it actually ended up being pretty special. So as I'm psyched about the Ticats, I'm hanging out with my buddies, you know, John and Jeff all the time, especially John. John and I almost hung out every day, even after I was done school. We'd hang out just by the field near my house on behind Lawfield School. And we'd actually stage our own wrestling shows too. I know it was strange, but we like to do angles more so than that. We try to hit our creativity and whatnot. It was like we were doing a backyard wrestling show in the field, you know what I mean? And we were starting to create our own characters too, so it was a lot of fun. So John and I were, you know, talking about Raw. Remember, it was Tuesday, July the 7th of 1998. I rode my bike home quickly, and it was a long bike ride after, a little bit after 3 o'clock, and I just rode as fast as I could to get home and watch Raw. Because, again, Austin had just won the title back the week before against Kane, and I want to see what's going to happen with The Undertaker. Now, that was a pretty stacked show in terms of that whole story. The show began with that awesome promo with Undertaker calling out Austin, and Austin responding, then Vince saying, oh, you two can tear each other apart. We're going to do it in a tag team match against Kane and Mankind at Fully Loaded. So I'm thinking, you know what? They're saving the big match for SummerSlam. I was like, kind of like doing the whole rubbing my hands thing, like Mr. Burns almost, and like, yes, excellent. And oh, it was so good. And the main event was a triple threat match between Kane, Mankind, and The Undertaker, or so we thought. The Undertaker didn't show up. That was the rumor. All night was going to show up. And I remember Vince and Austin were on commentary for this, and Vince like, this is what the WWE is all about. And when Mankind refused to fight Kane because he's his friend, and then Kane smashed, Mankind with a chair, and I fell for a hook, line, and sinker, and they rolled Mankind back in the ring, pinned him. I'm like, well, I guess we're getting Austin and Kane again? I guess. And he tore out the mask. It was The Undertaker. And they're like, yo, way! Like, I was losing it. And he gave Austin, like, this death stare. Austin just couldn't believe it. And then they're showing out there. I'm like, that was one of the best endings to Raw I had, like, ever seen at that point. So, like I said, I check the ratings every week on Spectel. And I'm thinking, WCW's going to have a tough time competing with this. Little did I know. Now, part of me in my head, watching WCW as much as I had, thought Goldberg might beat Hogan, but it might be by like disqualification or count out, because Hogan at the time was, aligning himself with Dennis Rodman, the star basketball player for the Chicago Bulls. And I liked Rodman as a basketball player. He may have been a nuisance. I can see why, obviously, but I thought he was a fantastic basketball player because I watched the Bulls a lot, obviously. They were the team. And now, with the subject of the Last Dance documentary, that final year for that Bulls dynasty had just wrapped up. And they had just beat the Utah Jazz, led by the mailman, Karl Malone. Karl Malone was aligning with DDP. He was going to make his wrestling debut. Rodman had already wrestled the year prior. So that was some interesting stuff, too. And I was just thinking to myself, what if Michael Jordan had actually, Jordan had joined up with DDP instead of Malone, and Jordan's being like, I was saying to Robin, I actually talked about this with my cousins. I said, it would be great if Jordan just, because again, you hear the stories about Rodman, and obviously we know now Jordan knew how to handle him for the most part, but I just thought it would have been great on Nitro if like Jordan had come out and said, I'm sick of your crap, but the season is over, business has been taken care of, now I'm going to take care of you in that ring. Like that. Honestly, and somebody brought this up on Twitter, and I replied to them too. They said had Jordan, because they had the same idea. What Michael Jordan had appeared instead of Malone? They would have pay-per-view. They would have smashed the pay-per-view records. I think. Honestly, you saw even Mike Tyson, who many thought was not a hot commodity anymore, how much he drew and helped WWF draw for WrestleMania 14 that year. Jordan was the most famous athlete in the world at that point. I will honestly say that. And he would have drawn so much. They would have probably outdrawn WrestleMania 14. I think they would have. But even so, they drew a huge number with this at the upcoming Bash at the Beach pay-per-view. They drew a very, very large number. So, again, if they drew a large number like that with Malone and Rodman, imagine Jordan. So anyway, after Raw, I discussed with my buddy John, because we love that ending. I call John every day. Even if we hadn't hung out, I call him, we talk wrestling, what happened on Raw, Nitro, whatever. So again, Wednesday, after that great Raw, summer school, rode my bike as fast as I could, parked it, got in the house, and was waiting for Nitro to start, only something happened. I got distracted. Big surprise, right? I got distracted. It was a phone call from my uncle Tim, who I was very close with. And he was looking for my mom, but she was at work. And he was just wanted me to leave a message for her. But then we started talking for a while. And for some reason, I had a brain fart and didn't think to turn on Nitro. And I don't know why. I think I just got sick, because the way my uncle talks, the way he passionately talks about subjects like music and whatnot, it's easy to get wrapped up in a conversation with him. And when John called me, he's like, hey, you watching Nitro? I'm like, oh, shit. So I grabbed the remote and turned on Nitro just in time to see the fact they're preparing for Goldberg to face Scott Hall. He's defending his U.S. title against Scott Hall or whatever. And I'm like, why? because John explained to me, oh, he's got to get through Scott Hall first, and he's got to get to Hogan. I'm like, maybe this is where they screw Goldberg over. Again, with watching WCW, I was expecting that sort of thing. And I wasn't quite a jaded fan, but I was able to, just predict little things here and there. With WWF, it was a little harder, again, with the Vince Russo style of booking the Crash TV. It was harder to predict a lot of stuff. I didn't really predict a lot of what happened in WWF. But the stuff I predicted, I wanted to see anyway. I knew Austin and Taker were going to be at SummerSlam that year, but I wanted to see that. So Goldberg actually beat Scott Hall, which is probably the biggest star he had beaten at that point. He had beaten Scott Hall in a fairly dominant fashion, actually. And Goldberg was also feuding with Kurt Hennig at the time. So another NWO member. So then I thought maybe he's going to interfere and help, Goldberg get Hogan disqualified or something like that later on. So I'm looking, oh yes, we're finally going to get Goldberg and Hogan. So I'm talking to John on the phone during the whole Scott Hall Goldberg match, and we both cheer when Goldberg wins. And I remember the visual of that crowd, that Georgia Dome crowd, that was 41,000. Now again, this was a record gate for WCW at that point, I believe. And even though it was somewhat papered, I believe it was 4,000 or 5,000 or so was papered. I'm trying to find the actual number. There's so many different, I looked it up online. I tried to do my research. There's so many different theories or numbers. But basically, we well know it was well over 30,000 people. At the very least, I'd say 35,000 paid. And just the other 5,000, 6,000 not, whatever. Either way, that's a large gate. That's a large house for a TV show. TV shows weren't really in stadiums. That was for the pay-per-views. Even in the 90s, the stadium show was not a big thing at this point. Even in the Attitude Era, the stadium show was not overly prominent in either company for that matter. So it was something special to see. And I remember just seeing that visual. And wow. And the camera shots they would do were insane. And I remember, I think Shivani said or something like that the roof could blow off this place, blow off the Georgia Dome. They'll use the old cliche from Gorilla Monsoon. And I'm thinking to myself, Goldberg wins tonight. It's gonna. So I hang out with John for now. I watch the rest of Nitro. I can tell you what, I can go online and read the recap, but off the top of my head, I can't remember much of that show at all. I just want to see Goldberg and Hogan. That's all I wanted to see. I didn't care about anything else. And I remember after watching that match, I'm like, okay, can we just get to I think Psychosis and maybe Hoovy faced off. And I remember it was DDP and Jim Neidhart. Yes, DDP and Jim Neidhart had a match, and Neidhart and Bulldog were not really being used at all overly well. And yeah. And I felt bad for those two because I was always big fans of them, obviously, but yeah. I think the Giant was feuding with Kevin Green. Oh God, I did not enjoy watching Kevin Green. And I liked Kevin Green. I liked Kevin Green as a football player. I thought he was awesome. But at this point, I'm over it already. Can we just move on? Yeah, so that's what I remember. I think Sting and Luger, something. I don't know. I can't remember every episode off by hand. I think because they're both part of the Wolfpack. I think I vaguely remember them tagging with somebody. That's right, because it was at the end of their match that John called me back, because now we're getting ready for Goldberg and Hogan. So Goldberg, again, gets that huge reaction as we're used to. And I remember John and I on the phone were just both going, Goldberg. We're excited for this. It's time. It's time for someone new to have the title. And I remember the anticipation, because Hogan didn't lose often. That's just it. That's why the mystique of a Hogan title defense and the probability of him losing was always special, because very rarely did he face a challenger that was insurmountable. As what I mean, and what I mean by that is that during his heel run, I always knew he was going to win. Yes, as a babyface, he obviously faced a lot of challenges that look insurmountable, but in WCW, not really. Even against the Giant, even though the Giant did end up winning the title from him, I never really truly believed he could. And stuff like that, I never truly believed Flair would beat him, anything like that. Vader, even him. And I liked those matches, but yeah, I didn't buy it usually. But I'm thinking this time Hogan has a chance to lose. But again, at this point, Hogan's history of not losing often, that's what gave the mystique. So as we're right into the match, John and I are saying, okay, who do you think is going to interfere? And we said Hennig, obviously. And DDP and Malone come out. And Malone gives DDP a diamond, and I'm like, yeah! And I can say on the phone and John, the mailman delivers! So Hogan gets distracted. The spirit of Hogan, and I am standing on my couch. I'm like, come on. And then he sets him up for the jackhammer. And John and I have the exact same time, jackhammer! 1, 2, and we just both yell at the top of our lungs. And we're like, wow, he beat the guy. He beat the biggest star in professional wrestling. In the history of professional wrestling. Hogan, to me, was still that guy. And the crowd, I remember even noticing the crowd, even over our yelling, the eruption at the Georgia Dome. It was a special moment for WCW fans who loved Goldberg, who were ready to see someone new rise above the veterans. And again, the veterans clearly still, again, I'm not one of those guys that says, oh, the old guard. Like, yes and no. Those guys still had value. Guys like Hogan, guys like Sting, guys like Nash, guys like Savage, even guys like Piper still had value. And Piper's WCW run is another story. I think I want to save that for another podcast. But anyway, digress. And even DDP at this point. DDP was a homegrown WCW. Well, I consider him a homegrown WCW talent. I know he had that managerial run in the AWA and whatnot. I know he did some stuff in that little Florida revival in the late 80s. But otherwise, he was a WCW guy to me. But DDP was never all over the main event scene. He was all over the upper mid-card, and that's not even a negative thing either. He was close to the main event and had been a few times, especially with Macho Man. But again, to me, DDP was an upper-tier guy, but I just never thought he was going to be the champion, at least in my head. I wouldn't have minded it at this point because I liked him. But Goldberg... And I said to John, after we calmed down, after cheering, I said, this is going to be the guy who leads WCW into the millennium. And, sorry about that, my computer. And John agreed with me. So we thought it was onward and upward for WCW. My faith in WCW still being something special was restored on this night. I was starting to lose a little faith. But I'm thinking just the possibilities for Goldberg. Goldberg versus Brett. I'm thinking Brett can finally face a main event challenge. I was thinking, actually, to be honest with you, I was thinking about Goldberg and the Giant. I thought that had something special behind it because the Giant was still pretty dominant wrestler at this point. I know he had lost a couple matches to Sting and whatnot, but it's Sting. You know what I mean? It's not like he was losing to freaking Sick Boy. You know what I mean? A Raven's flock. So I was actually psyched for what was around the corner for Goldberg. I was hoping some with him and the Giant would take place. I was hoping with him and Brett. But then I thought to myself after a while, like, who else is there? And then John and I talking, and he's like, oh, maybe Nash? Little did we know. No idea. I'm not trying to say I called. No, I never called that. I never called who was going to end the streak, ever. We thought about Nash and a couple others. But then it occurred to me, like, oh, Goldberg Sting. That's a natural moneymaker. So we thought there's a few opponents he could have. Right? We know you're still feeding with Kurt Hennig, but let's face it, I never thought for a second Kurt Hennig was going to beat Goldberg, and I love the perfect one, but no, just no. So I was looking forward to episodes of Nitro again, like I was 2 years prior to this. 2 years when the NWO had formed. And when I found out the ratings, when I called that hotline on Spectel, I heard that the Hogan-Goldberg match alone drew a 6.91 rating. That's nearly a 7. And they dominated Raw the entire evening. The final number for all of Nitro drew a 4.85. It beat Raw by nearly a point. So clearly Bischoff's plan worked. And yes, there is the debate that still lingers on to this day. This match should have been done on pay-per-view. It would have drawn a huge number. It would have drawn an astronomical number. Even for a pay-per-view like Bash the Beach, they couldn't do that because the whole thing with Hogan and Rodman against DDP and Malone was set. But like even a Road Wild, the match, probably would have drawn the best gate, being what Road Wild's concept was. it would have more than made up for it on pay-per-view. So, but still, again, that's the benefit of hindsight, right? You just never know. And still, it was still a great moment. As a fan, I would take that moment back. Again, like any of these moments I'm reviewing, there's a lot of moments I just would not take back for anything. This was one of them. And I enjoyed, even though I was on the phone with John, who was, out of all my wrestling pals, not counting my cousins, he was like my best friend. And he was my best friend in general, because we both love movies and everything, TV. That it was just a great moment even to share with him over the phone. So, again, there's the moments, the little things you have to cherish in life. And believe it or not, Goldberg winning the WCW title, we're going to tell you how you feel about Goldberg today. That's a whole other podcast. It doesn't matter. I remember the following weekend of this match. Again, the show was July 6th, 98. I didn't see it until July 8th, 98. The Wednesday. I went to my cousins that weekend. Or actually, wait a minute. No, I'm jumping the gun here. Actually, it wasn't that weekend. I saw it was later that night. I forgot. Because the same night, at the last minute, pretty much, because my parents were both working late that day, I remember my dad had called the house saying, hey, get ready. You're going to the Tie-Cat game tonight with your cousins and your uncle. My Uncle Roy was taking us. I think my dad didn't end up joining us. But and my cousins and I went to the Tie-Cat game. It was a home opener that year. And they had crushed the Winnipeg Blue Bombers after losing their home opener. After losing the season opener. This is the home opener. They crushed the Bombers, and we're thinking this Tie-Cat team is a complete 180 from what they were last year. The year before 97, they were 2-16. Ugh, terrible memories. But no, my grandmother had given up her season tickets, so she was not going to go to many games as often as she used to. So I started going with my cousins and my uncle a bit more. And as well as my dad would come along. Some games he would, some games he wouldn't. Some games it would be my dad, not my uncle. It always switched back and forth. But either way, I was always with my cousins. And I got to the stadium, and we met up with my cousins. I said, and the first thing my cousin Wayne says to me, Goldberg's the champion! Did you watch it? Like, yes, I did. We were talking about it all prior to the game. And I remember my uncle was getting a little annoyed, saying, okay, not enough wrestling talk, football time. And that's just my uncle in a nutshell. He used to be not a big wrestling fan too. He was a wrestling fan, but just at this point he really wasn't. So that's okay, whatever. So we stopped talking. We just enjoyed the game. So, but it was still something that we loved to talk about. I remember I had to get right to bed and go to summer school the next day. Oh God, terrible. But anyway, so Ticats won that game. I believe it was by 20 points. Danny McManus and Darren Flutie were just on their game. I remember going nuts for Flutie because it's my first time seeing him in a Tie-Cat uniform. He was my favorite player. It was just a good time to be a teenager. The WWF was on their way to the highway to hell to SummerSlam. Goldberg was the champion, starting to restore my faith a bit in WCW again. And the Hamilton Ticats looked like they were a Grey Cup contender for the first time in a long time. I know I had my high hopes in '96, but that was quickly dashed even before the halfway point of the season. And the summer ahead was full of great movies. I remember, oh God, I saw Can't Hardly Wait in theaters just before that. That was when Can't Hardly Wait came out. Seth Green, 92%, yo. God, I'm probably speaking foreign to some of you younger ones out there. Can't Hardly Wait was, I mean, people credit American Pie being the first teen movie, really, of that era. It was the first raunchy one, that's for sure, and it was a bigger hit. Can't Hardly Wait didn't become a big hit until it was on video, and its cult status grew years later. But really, that was kind of one of the, I remember that being one of the first in terms of that teen movie era genre. And I remember seeing that with John just before I had to start going to summer school. And I remember looking forward to movies like The Negotiator coming out, and Basketball with Trey Parker and Matt Stone. God. Saving Private Ryan. Yes. It was just it set the tone for what was an epic summer. Again, hanging out with my cousins all the time. Even during the summer school time, I was still seeing them a lot. Weekends, Tie-Cat games, and we went camping in August. That was a great yearly tradition with us and my uncle. He would take us every year for about 3-4 years. He did, and it was just a good time to be alive. Not just with wrestling, with everything. I wasn't popular in school, but I had good friends. I was happy, and wrestling was a significant part of that. Both watching the great stuff of the WCW and WWF was just something to behold. And then Jay Leno started wrestling. Yeah. That's another podcast for another day. I might even consider doing that one in August. I don't know. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, reminiscing about the time Goldberg became the champion. And next week, we're going to go back to the WWE. Yes, I've been talking about WWF quite a bit, but WWE obviously with the Benoit thing. But WWE, fast forwarding to when I'm a little older, to when I'm 28, to the summer of Punk. I'm talking about CM Punk in that amazing, unforgettable summer in 2011. We're going to go all the way from the Pipe Bomb promo all the way to SummerSlam 2011, and of course, right in between that big Money in the Bank pay-per-view with him and John Cena. A lot to talk about, a lot of fun. Again, I'm a lot older at this point, so it's a different dynamic of me being a wrestling fan. I know I was 24 when the Benoit thing happened, but here I'm pushing 30. So things are changing in my life. Things are changing for my fandom. And believe me, it's just such a great story to tell. I'm looking forward to telling you that story next week. So again, next week, the Summer of Punk, the WWE version, I should specify, there was a Summer of Punk at ROH years prior. But yes, this will be the Summer of Punk WWE version. That is next week here on Diary of a Wrestling Fan. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to keep listening on Anchor or Spotify, wherever podcasts are streamed. Also, if you're listening on YouTube, there's really not much to watch in these videos, but still a lot to listen to. Please subscribe. Also, check out Pro Wrestling Ontario. Follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at BillChase33 on both accounts, and just simply Bill Chase on Facebook if you want to talk wrestling. So, until next time, this is your friend of mine, Bill Chase, quoting one of my favorite Hamiltonians ever when I tell you, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you don't like the show and would like to send some hate mail feedback, just direct your feedback to @ClayWilson93 on Twitter.